Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, I'd like to thank the Malaysian Palm Oil Council for inviting the Malaysian Biodiesel Association to present this paper about challenges and opportunities. I know many of you who have attended many palm oil programs would have heard a number of the slides that I'm going to show today, but I also know there are many new faces who are probably attending this for the first time. So I'd like to take you through a bit of history so that we put matters in perspective and see where we started from and where we are today and where we should be heading. So my presentation outline would cover all these aspects. First, a word about the organization that I represent, the Malaysian Biodiesel Association, an overview of what's happening around the world with respect to biodiesel, because that itself is a good backdrop to understand what the rest of the world is doing and what we should be doing in order to align ourselves or to get the best results from this industry itself. Then I'll take you through what the Malaysian biodiesel mandate is all about and the benefits to the Malaysian economy. I'll also take you through a bit of short history about how our markets have performed both in the export market as well as the local market. And then, as my title said, we'll discuss what are our current challenges and what really are the opportunities, if at all there are some opportunities for this industry. So let's start with MBA. MBA was set up in September 2008, basically to represent the interest of the biodiesel industry in Malaysia. Our vision is obviously to establish a sustainable, environment-friendly and economically viable biodiesel industry, both in Malaysia as well as globally. We work very closely with all relevant agencies that are involved in the national biofuel policy implementation, as well as every stakeholder that has a role to play in the implementation of the biofuel program. We are affiliated with both the RSPO as well as RSB, which is the Roundtable on Sustainable Biofuels. We have 17 members and we have an installed capacity of about 2.1 million tons. And these, as you can see from the map here, are distributed between Peninsular Malaysia and East Malaysia. So we have adequate plants to cover a regional distribution both in Peninsular Malaysia as well as in East Malaysia. Let's now move on to what the global biodiesel scenario is like today. This is a slide that I borrowed from Oil World, which is quite a reliable statistic. As you can see, in the year 2017, the world produced about 35 million tons of biodiesel. That's approximately between 15 and 16% of the total oils and fats that the world produces. Now that's a substantial number when you talk about a single segment other than food application that mops up so much quantity of vegetable oil. And therefore, I don't need to say how much of an impact it has had and it will continue to have in terms of its effect on prices of vegetable oils. You also see from the chart that biodiesel quantities have been steadily increasing year by year. And as you would probably hear from other speakers, and my own personal view is, in the year 2018, we could see at least an additional 4 million tons being produced from around the world. So clearly, there is an increased production of biodiesel. And that's again a graphic of how biodiesel production has increased over the years. I have tabulated for the ease of understanding, if you look at all the major oils that go into production of biodiesel and start analyzing how many million metric tons each of these oils contributed, you will see palm biodiesel is right at the top. About 31% of the total biodiesel produced in 2017 was from palm. Not produced just in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand or Colombia, but also by way of palm that has been exported to European Union and then converted into biodiesel in the European Union. The next one is SME, which is soya methyl ester. Again, a significantly high quantity, over 26% of the total biodiesel that is produced. And the third one, obviously, is rapeseed-based methyl ester, and the last one being tallow methyl ester. What I wanted to emphasize by way of this slide is that it is extremely important to understand that palm oil as an input for biodiesel, and therefore palm biodiesel as a part of the biodiesel mix globally, has played a very significant role in terms of disappearance of palm oil as a commodity in the vegetable oil complex. And therefore, we cannot think of a situation, particularly in the current environment when prices are so depressed, to have imagined a world where we wouldn't have biodiesel. I can't imagine the price of CPO. It could probably be well below 1,500 if we did not have all this biofuel usage. This is again a pictorial representation of the same thing, where individual oils that constitute the biodiesel mix, and you can see the chart is very clear, again borrowed from Oil World. You can see the different oils that constitute the mix, and it increases over a period of time. Here I want to actually pause for a minute and take you through the experience of what other countries have been doing. And why I want to emphasize this is because Malaysia decided to move from B7 to B10 by way of a cabinet decision in May 2016. Yet, we are in August 2018, we haven't implemented this. The world has moved on, and I must, for those of you who attended Dr. James Fry's evening forum yesterday, I must tell you, all these slides that I have was sent to MPOC well before Dr. Fry presented his paper. So if there are slides that align my thinking to what he has done, it is actually a very strange coincidence. All I'm trying to say is, look at the chart where I have marked the countries in green. These are countries that have moved beyond the threshold of B7 that most automakers find as the threshold beyond which biodiesel, according to them, is technically a misfit to be used in vehicles. Yet, states like the Minnesota in USA, Colombia, which uses actually more than 600,000 tons of palm oil for biodiesel out of just over 1 million tons that it produces, Argentina, our big brother Indonesia, which is already at B20, and I'll show you later their plans to increase it to B25 and B30. The point I'm trying to make is exactly what Dr. Fry made yesterday. There is enough technical evidence that B10 with palm biodiesel, if that can work in a country like Colombia, where the city of Bogota has much lower temperatures than in sunny tropical Malaysia, yet they have no problem using B10, and we are struggling with a decision to move from B7 to B10. The reasons could be many, but whatever are the compulsions, I think enough evidence has been provided that a decision needs to be taken, particularly in the light of the current low prices of CPO, that Malaysia must move forward. So, with that backdrop of what's happening around the world with biodiesel, although it might be made from different vegetable oil sources, let us look at what is the overview of the biodiesel industry in Malaysia. Now, for those of you who are part of this journey, you know that Malaysia started very early. But many of you might not be familiar that this work was started in the early 1980s by the Malaysian Palm Oil Board, where they set up the first palm methyl ester pilot plant. And then it led to the first commercial plant being built at Carotino. I was fortunate enough to be associated with that. And subsequent to that, we have so many new plants that have been built up until in 2008, there was a decision to implement a national mandate for blending biofuel at 5% level, what we call as B5. To date, this industry has put in about 2.2 billion ringgit, and the total CPO stock that we have consumed, not for export, but just for local blending, is over 1 million tons. That also shows that today at B7, I haven't heard of a single complaint of any vehicle breaking down at B7, even not one complaint from any vehicle manufacturer. The industry has been exporting since 2006, but you know this industry is dependent on the parity between CPO price and gas oil price. And later I'll show you how our markets have performed in the discretionary market, blending market, where people tend to only buy when biodiesel is cheaper than gas oil. The Malaysian biodiesel mandate, the story goes back to 2008 when the first decision was taken. In 2011, around June, we started the B5 blending program. It was rolled out region by region. By December 2014, we rolled it out across the country. And then in 2014, we launched the B7 program. And in 2016, as I told you, the cabinet took a decision to move from B7 to B10 for transport, B7 to B10 for transport, and to introduce B7 in the industry. But sadly, till today, this decision has not come into effect. So this whole program was a part of a much broader national policy which was drafted as the National Biofuel Policy with 5 key thrusts. That biofuel be developed for transport, it be developed for industry, that new biofuel technologies be developed, particularly using palm as a raw material, and also to look at how biofuels can be exported, how competitive it can be, and of course, for a cleaner environment. The Malaysian biodiesel mandate, as I mentioned, is a very structured program with all stakeholders coming together. Several discussions went into it to make sure that we have a proper infrastructure in Malaysia. Unlike many other countries who do blending by way of splash blending, Malaysia actually has got excellent infrastructure for blending diesel with biodiesel, with proper instrumentation to make sure that our blending happens well and it is homogeneous. We are also governed by standards, by the MS standards, which have been modeled around the EN 14214, which is kind of considered the gold standard for biodiesel. Very recently, if you see where countries, our neighboring countries are going, recently Indonesia announced a move towards B25. Thailand originally planned by early 2019 to do B10. I understand now they've already gone ahead and done B10. Colombia now nationwide is doing B10. In USA, some states have gone up to B20. Argentina and Brazil are on B10. France also is at B8. I think there is enough evidence, and we have talked so much about the technical aspects of why biodiesel, particularly palm biodiesel in Malaysia, should not, there is no reason why it cannot go from B7 to B10. There are a number of benefits, as we have always highlighted to every stakeholder. The first benefit to the Malaysian economy is, we all know, and as I started my presentation, can you imagine now a world without biodiesel, with 35 million tons of product not being used for biodiesel? One cannot imagine what would be the situation of prices for these commodities. So obviously, this is a fantastic mechanism to provide price support. Malaysia is a country where 40% of the total CPO output is produced by smallholders. Over 650,000 smallholders depend on this industry for their livelihood. Can you imagine them operating at a market price where their costs cannot be covered? So clearly, it has a huge benefit to the Malaysian economy. we did an analysis of year-on-year stock change as reported by Malaysian Palm Oil Board and plotted that against its price of CPO. And we came to more or less a linear curve where we find, at least from our analysis, that if you were, as we were looking at moving from B7 to B10, it was expected to take out about 300,000 tons of palm oil. And our analysis shows that it could improve the price of CPO by about 390 ringgit per ton. Now, every 100 ringgit per ton increase in CPO price in Malaysia means an additional 2 billion contribution to the country's economy. So, huge impact on the major commodity in the agricultural complex that Malaysia produces. It cannot be overemphasized as to how well this crop and this industry performs for the Malaysian economy. There is no doubt that the Malaysian fossil fuel reserves are also depleting. And in a depleting fossil fuel situation, it is important to conserve the fossil fuels we have. And therefore, the more palm biodiesel we use, which is a renewable source, we can conserve our fossil fuels for a later date when we need it more. If you look at the greenhouse gas emission reduction, clearly this chart shows how effective pure palm biodiesel is in terms of reducing unburned hydrocarbons. As you can see, over 67% reduction, carbon monoxide nearly 50% reduction. So clearly, biodiesel has an impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Malaysia has also been a signatory to the Paris Climate Conference COP21, where it committed to reduce its greenhouse gas intensity by 45% by the year 2030. Now, clearly palm biodiesel has a role to play, and we did some numbers that if we were to implement B20 in the country, it would result in a greenhouse gas reduction of approximately 6 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. That, combined with methane capture in our mills, which would be another 16.3 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent, we would actually be able to meet over 23% of Malaysia's entire greenhouse reduction target just by these two strategies coming out of the palm oil industry. Now, it's very difficult to estimate what is the value of CO2 mitigation. But I did find a McKinsey report, which is way back in 2007, that actually calculates that, this is of course on a global basis, that for every million metric tons of CO2 equivalent, it would require about $50 US. Calculated for the amount that this would reduce, that works out to a total reduction of 4.6 billion ringgit equivalent. Now, very few people actually understand. They always calculate the difference in cents per liter of biodiesel compared to diesel. But the secondary benefits of environmental reduction in greenhouse gases is an important factor that must get into the equation when you want to take a holistic view about what the country needs to do. Of course, when you move towards cleaner fuels, when you want to have ultra-low sulfur diesel, which has lower sulfur content, we know that as sulfur content drops, the lubricity of diesel also drops. And invariably what petroleum companies do is they add additives in order to improve the lubricity. Now that costs some money. For example, in Malaysia today, between Euro 2 and Euro 5, there is a difference of 10 Malaysian cents per liter. Now, not only it is because it has got lower sulfur, it's also because there are additives that go into it to improve its lubricity. You know what? Biodiesel, when blended at 5 to 10%, totally takes away the need for you to add these additives, which are petrochemical additives, into diesel. So there is also an economic benefit. At the same time, there is a quality benefit that consumers can get. So if you look at our history of export and local markets, I have analyzed this from 2006 until now. We have had 4 periods. The early period, CPO used to be around, I still remember in 2006, when we first started exports to EU, CPO price was around 1,350 ringgit. Obviously, crude oil price was high, so that resulted in the first part of this chart, an export boom. And then prices of CPO went up so high that it was not competitive. It led to a collapse of the export market. And then both Malaysia and Indonesia, as I'll show you in the subsequent slides, realized that export as an avenue to keep and sustain this industry is not a long-term solution. So quickly, local blending became the order of the day, and we had to get more domestic consumption going. As you can see here, this is a combined chart of Malaysia plus Indonesia. So in the 4 periods that I have described, progressively, what started off as an export-oriented industry has become very much dependent on local policies and local mandates. Clearly, what drives this is food value versus energy value. So long as there is parity between CPO and crude oil or CPO and gas oil, this business can work. If it is not, this business won't work, as I'll show you in the next few slides. So clearly, I think as time progressed, in almost every country, except for Argentina maybe at the moment, I think most economies are depending on their own local mandate to push this industry. This is some latest statistics that I would like to present. If you see from 2011, when we started the local mandate at B5 until July this year, 2018, you will see that not only production has steadily increased, but the domestic local consumption for mandate has also increased as we went from B5 to B7. What is interesting is that at the moment, you will see that by July, Malaysia has exported almost 270,000 tons, which is a record high for exports of biodiesel. And I'll show you why it happened in this particular year and not in the other years. So the most significant aspect for economic viability in the export market is what we call as POGO, palm oil gas oil spread. Now, the more negative the POGO is, the better it is for exports. And here's my analysis of the chart as to why suddenly you see a big surge in exports in the year 2018 from Malaysia, so also from Indonesia. You look at the first column, it talks about gas oil price, the next one talks about CPO, and the third one talks about POGO. From around March 2018, when POGO was positive at around $30 per ton, we are today at over $120 negative. That clearly shows biodiesel is more competitive, and that clearly explains why we are having more and more exports happening out of both Malaysia and Indonesia. So, what then are the challenges and opportunities that we have when we look at this industry? We have too many challenges and very few opportunities. But we have to make do with both. We have to face the challenges and yet find windows of opportunity to make sure that this industry survives. The first one is we have too much opposition from automakers, transporters, who keep saying that we have an engine warranty issue between B7 and B10. I cannot understand when the whole world has moved on to B10 and 20, why vehicles in Malaysia are not made in Mars. They're still made on planet Earth. So I don't quite understand why there is so much of opposition here. So there is this hurdle that we have to overcome. But my take on this is, no matter how much discussion we do, it has to come through a government directive, just like it is in Indonesia. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Two, awareness. There's a lack of awareness about the benefits of palm biodiesel, be it for energy security, be it for a cleaner environment, be it for a support for CPO price. I think in general, the population, the country's citizens don't have a clear understanding, and more work needs to be done there. We have heard so much about tariff barriers. Every country is trying to protect its own market. And then we have non-tariff barriers by way of certifications, and now with the EU ILUC as the new buzzword, trying to again single out palm and palm biofuel. So we have all these challenges that we grapple with every day. However, out of all these challenges, there are opportunities. As I told you, if Malaysia or any country that is keen on getting their environment to be cleaner and better, use of biofuels is definitely a good strategy. Malaysia could collaborate with large population countries like India and China who have a major environmental pollution problem. And we could play a role either by way of exports to that market or even as investors into setting up facilities. But they have a problem with raw material. We have it available abundantly here, so we have to strike a balance. There is an opportunity to cooperate with regional palm-producing countries under the aegis of CPOPC, where we can share experiences of how automakers have reacted, how has the industry performed, how is the economics working, share those notes and work together to build a market that specifically focuses, and the Malaysian Biodiesel Association is playing a role by making an ASEAN collaboration at least in terms of palm-producing countries which are producing palm biodiesel. One forgets that even in a country like Malaysia, which is a producer of crude petroleum, we export crude petroleum, but we buy diesel. Now, it's a huge drain on the forex. Malaysia today has about 7 to 8 million tons of diesel. All of that is imported, and with a current exchange rate of 4.1 ringgit to a dollar, a huge amount of forex is going out. The more biodiesel we use, the less we need to import, and therefore we save forex. I already told you about how the price is a great leverage. We can use that. You use 10 to 20% for biodiesel, get benefit for 100% of your commodity. We have been emphasizing this from the year 2007. It's been 11 years that we are trying to convince that this model is very critical. Again, I want to emphasize, I wrote this presentation before Dr. Fry made that presentation yesterday. I strongly support also the CPO export tax model of Indonesia, where they create a kitty that allows the industry without support from government to make a win-win-win situation. Win for plantation owners, win for the government, win for the biodiesel industry, and win for consumers at large. The last point I'd like to add is another way that Malaysia can move forward is if we look at downstream applications of methyl ester, particularly with high crude prices and low CPO prices, products like methyl ester sulfonate that goes into detergents, methyl ester ethoxylates, these are new products, now can find good economic viability. We have demonstrated in Malaysia that if we produce co-products like palm phytonutrients together with palm biodiesel, the economics of the entire business improves. In the past, it wasn't so economically viable because CPO was at a much higher price. So clearly, ladies and gentlemen, I hope through this short 30-minute presentation, I have been able to take you through not only an overview, the highs and lows of this industry, but also able to tell you the kind of challenges that we are facing. As we speak now, we have a new issue of SST coming up for local biodiesel. And I was told until this morning that biodiesel is going to be having SST, but diesel is exempted. I cannot understand, both are the same components, and yet one is taxed and the other is not. But I have got clarification this morning that for local blending, petco's will not be charged. with SST, but still it would prevent exports and local sales to industry if SST is imposed on biodiesel. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your attention.